"To my Eleanor," Richard said, and everyone raised their glasses. Richard had just finished his speech about loyalty, and the guests were applauding. I walked to the microphone, my heart beating steady and cold like a metronome. "I have a surprise too," I said, and the massive screen behind me lit up with a photo. "Hi friends, I'm glad you're here with me today. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and now let's step right into the story." I raised my glass. The grand ballroom at the Peninsula Chicago fell completely silent. 250 pairs of eyes, the eyes of Chicago's elite, our friends, our colleagues, were all on me. My husband of 30 years, Richard Vance, stood beside me, his arm possessively around my waist, his face glowing with pride. He had just finished a beautiful speech, full of lies about devotion and a lifetime of shared dreams. The applause had barely faded. He squeezed my waist, a silent cue for me to begin my loving tribute. But I wasn't looking at him. My eyes were fixed on the small black remote control hidden in the palm of my hand. The clicker felt cold against my skin. It was the detonator. With one press of a single red button, I was about to burn our entire carefully constructed life to the ground, and I was going to enjoy every second of the inferno. I smiled, a wide, bright smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thank you, Richard," I said, my voice smooth and clear through the microphone. "That was beautiful. 30 years. It's a long time." I paused, letting the sentiment hang in the air, thick and sweet like the perfume from the towering floral arrangements. "You spoke of our journey, of the life we built, but a picture is worth 1,000 words, isn't it? So I have a little surprise, a slideshow of my own." Richard's smile widened. He probably thought it was a collection of old family photos, pictures of our son Leo growing up, vacations to Martha's Vineyard. He looked over at Leo, who was sitting at the head table next to his fiancée, Isabella. Leo met my gaze from across the room. His face was a pale, tight mask, but his eyes gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. I turned my back to the audience and faced the massive projection screen that hung behind the stage. "Let's start at the very beginning of the end," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Then I pressed the button. There was a soft click. The screen, which had been displaying a tasteful monogram of our initials, flickered and then lit up. But it wasn't a photo of our wedding day. It was a crystal-clear, high-resolution image taken just last week. It showed the grand marble-floored lobby of our apartment building, and in the center of the frame, bathed in the warm light of a chandelier, were two people. My husband, Richard, and my son's fiancée, Isabella. They were locked in a deep, passionate kiss. His hands were tangled in her hair. Her arms were wrapped tightly around his neck. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was the kiss of lovers who thought no one was watching. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock that washed over the silent crowd. I heard a wine glass shatter somewhere in the back. I turned slowly to face them. Richard's face had gone from beaming pride to a ghastly, mottled white. His mouth was hanging open, a perfect O of disbelief. He looked from the screen to me, his eyes wide with panic. Next to him, Isabella had frozen, her hand clutching the pearls at her throat. Her beautiful, calculated composure had shattered into a million pieces. Her face was a mask of pure horror. She looked like a cornered animal, and in that moment, seeing their perfect world crumble, I felt nothing. No pain, no jealousy, just the cold, clean satisfaction of justice. The show was just beginning. 30 years ago, things were different. My world wasn't a grand ballroom in a 5-star hotel. It was a cramped second-floor apartment in Wicker Park with pipes that rattled and a kitchen table that doubled as my office. It was 1995. I was 25 years old, working a junior marketing job during the day and freelancing at night, fueled by cheap coffee and a fierce, burning ambition. Richard was the artist, the visionary. He was a brilliant young architect with a portfolio full of breathtaking designs and a bank account full of nothing. He had the talent, but I had the grit. And I had $50,000. It was every cent my grandmother had left me. It was supposed to be a down payment on a house, a safety net. But Richard had a bigger dream. Vance and Associates Architects, he'd say, his eyes shining. It has a ring to it, doesn't it? We just need a little seed money, Ellie, to rent a small office, get a proper drafting table. He was so charming, so full of infectious confidence. I believed in him more than I believed in myself, so I wrote him a check for the full $50,000. My entire inheritance, my safety net, gone. My father told me I was a fool. "That man will be the death of you, Eleanor," he said. I didn't listen. I started Vance Marketing from that same wobbly kitchen table with a second-hand computer and a dial-up modem that shrieked like a banshee. I did it to support us, to pay the rent, to buy the groceries, to give Richard the freedom to focus on the great work, as he called it. Our son, Leo, was born a couple of years later. I remember bouncing him on my knee with one hand while typing up marketing proposals with the other. I worked while he slept, sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning. My world shrank to the size of that apartment, to the smell of baby powder and brewing coffee. Richard's world expanded. He got the downtown office. He started wearing expensive suits. He went to networking lunches and industry dinners. I was the foundation, the invisible scaffolding that held up his glittering career. He was the beautiful building everyone admired, and for a long time, that was enough for me. I was proud of him. I loved him. There was a time, about 10 years into our marriage, when he almost lost everything. A big commercial project he designed went bust. The developer declared bankruptcy, leaving Richard with a mountain of debt and angry contractors. We were on the verge of losing our apartment. He was a wreck, pacing the floor night after night, talking about how his career was over. I remember sitting with him at that kitchen table, holding his hand, while he stared blankly at a pile of unpaid bills. The next morning, I went to a pawn shop on Clark Street. I took off the sapphire and diamond necklace my grandmother had worn on her wedding day. It was the only truly valuable thing I owned, the last piece of her I had left. The man behind the counter, a sad-eyed guy with a stained tie, offered me $10,000 for it. It was worth at least 3 times that. I didn't bargain. I just took the cash. I used it to pay off the most pressing of Richard's debts. When I came home, my neck felt bare. He never asked where the money came from. He never asked about the necklace. He just kissed me, said, "You saved me, Ellie," and went back to his drafting table. A few months later, he landed the biggest contract of his career. We moved into a bigger place. He started making real money. But I never forgot the feeling of walking out of that pawn shop, feeling a little piece of my own history die so that his future could live. I was the silent partner, the ghost investor in the firm that bore only his name. I sacrificed my past so he could build his future, a future, I would later learn, that he never planned on sharing with me. The cracks started to show slowly, so slowly you could almost convince yourself they weren't there. For years, it was just the 3 of us, me, Richard, and Leo, our little universe. Then Leo went to college, started his own life as a filmmaker, and the house got quiet. Richard and I circled each other in our beautiful empty apartment, 2 strangers who knew how to perform the roles of husband and wife. The real shift happened about 2 years ago, the day Leo brought Isabella home. She was 24 at the time, whip-smart, beautiful, and dripping with an ambition that felt sharp and dangerous. She was a financial analyst at J.P. Morgan, and she never let you forget it. On the surface, she was perfect, the kind of daughter-in-law a mother is supposed to dream of. But I never trusted her. There was a coldness in her eyes, a calculating quality to her smile. She looked at our life, at our beautiful home overlooking Lake Michigan, not with warmth, but with appraisal, like she was estimating its value. Richard, however, was immediately captivated. "She's brilliant, Ellie," he'd say after she left. "A real go-getter. Reminds me of you when you were young." But he never looked at me like that anymore. With Isabella, he came alive. He'd lean forward when she spoke, hang on her every word. She quickly found a way to weave herself into the fabric of his world. It started with finances. "Richard, you should really consider diversifying your portfolio," she'd say, her voice smooth as silk. "Let me show you a few options." Soon they were having private investment meetings. They'd sit in his study with the door closed, poring over spreadsheets. He started calling her his protégé. He was her mentor. They had a whole language of inside jokes, of shared glances over my head at the dinner table. I was becoming a ghost in my own home. I remember one night specifically. It was a Thursday. Leo was out of town for a film festival. Richard came into the living room already dressed in one of his expensive suits. "Isabella and I are grabbing a bite with a potential client of hers," he said, adjusting his tie in the hall mirror. "Don't wait up." Just like that. Not an invitation, a declaration. "Oh," I said, looking up from my laptop. "I didn't realize we had plans." He finally turned to look at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "It's not we, Ellie. It's work. You'd be bored. It's all financial talk, mergers and acquisitions. I run a marketing firm with 20 employees and a 7-figure annual turnover, Richard," I said, my voice tight. "I think I can handle a little financial talk." He just laughed, a dismissive, patronizing sound. "It's not the same. This is high-level stuff. Anyway, we should get going. Don't want to be late." He kissed the air somewhere near my cheek and walked out the door, leaving the scent of his expensive cologne lingering in the air like a taunt. I sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door. It wasn't about the dinner. It was about the dismissal. The casual way he erased me from the equation. He and his protégé. They had a world, and I wasn't invited. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was the feeling of being replaced. That night, I went to bed alone in our king-sized bed, the space beside me cold and empty. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I wasn't just losing my husband's attention. I was losing him. The money was the next thing. It always comes down to money, doesn't it? About a year ago, Richard came to me with another one of his brilliant ideas, an idea whispered in his ear by Isabella. He wanted $75,000. "It's a sure thing, Ellie," he said, pacing back and forth in our living room, his voice full of that old, familiar excitement he used to have for his own designs. "It's an offshore real estate development. Isabella got an inside tip. The returns are going to be astronomical. We have to get in now." He was talking fast, avoiding my eyes. My gut screamed at me. I've run my own business for 30 years. I know a bad deal when I smell one, and this stank to high heaven. An inside tip? Richard, that sounds risky, I said carefully. "Can I see the prospectus?" His face darkened instantly. The charming visionary vanished, replaced by a petulant stranger. "Why do you have to question everything? It's Isabella's field. She knows what she's doing. Don't you trust my judgment?" "I trust my own," I said quietly. $75,000 is a lot of money to invest based on a tip. "Fine," he snapped, throwing his hands up in the air. "Forget it. I'll handle it myself. I just thought you'd want to be part of our success." He stormed out of the room, slamming the door to his study. The conversation was over. He didn't bring it up again, and I foolishly thought that was the end of it. I thought my refusal had protected our finances. I was so naive. The truth came out 6 months later, hidden in a plain white envelope from our bank. It was a quarterly mortgage statement. I almost threw it away. We'd paid off our mortgage years ago. But something made me open it. I unfolded the paper, and my breath caught in my chest. The words blurred together, but 2 figures stood out in sharp, brutal clarity. Loan amount, $150,000, and loan origination date June 12th, 6 months ago. the week after Richard had asked me for the $75,000. My hands started to shake. This wasn't possible. I would have had to sign documents. I would have known. I sank onto a kitchen chair, the cheap paper rattling in my trembling fingers. He had gone behind my back. He had forged my signature. He had taken out a second mortgage on our home, the home I had worked my whole life for. That night, when he came home, I was waiting for him at the kitchen table. The bank statement was laid out between us. "What is this, Richard?" I asked. My voice was eerily calm. He looked at the paper, then at me. For a split second, I saw panic in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a mask of weary condescension. "Oh, that," he said with a dismissive wave. "I handled it. It's that investment I told you about. I didn't want to bother you with the paperwork." "Bother me? You forged my signature on a $150,000 loan, and you didn't want to bother me." He had the audacity to act offended. "Eleanor, you're being hysterical. Of course you signed it. We discussed it right here in this kitchen. You were just stressed with that big project at work. You probably forgot." He was gaslighting me, standing in my own kitchen, looking me straight in the eye and telling me my own memory was a lie. He was trying to make me believe I was crazy, that I had signed away our security and simply forgotten about it. I stared at him, at this man I had shared a bed with for 3 decades, and in that moment I realized I wasn't looking at my husband. I was looking at a thief, a stranger who would steal from his own wife and then call her crazy for noticing. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that turned suspicion into unbearable certainty, was brought to me by my son. Leo came over on a Tuesday afternoon. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had the haunted look of someone who hadn't slept in days. He walked past me into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, his hands shaking so badly that the glass rattled against his teeth. He was my son. I knew his every mood, every expression. This was more than just stress from his latest film project. This was pain, deep, raw pain. "Leo, what is it?" I asked, my own heart starting to pound. "What's wrong?" He leaned against the counter and finally looked at me. His eyes were filled with a misery that broke my heart. "Mom," he started, his voice cracking. "It's about Dad and Isabella." He told me he'd had his own doubts for months. The late-night phone calls she'd take, whispering on the balcony. The way her eyes would light up, not when he entered a room, but when his father did. He'd been telling himself he was crazy, paranoid, but the excuses were wearing thin. "Last week," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "I came home early to surprise her. Her car was in the garage, but she wasn't in our apartment. I called her cell. She said she was stuck in a meeting downtown." He took a shaky breath. "Mom, she was lying. I knew it, so I waited." An hour later, Dad's car pulled into the garage, and she got out of the passenger seat. He looked down at his hands, his knuckles white. They didn't see me. He leaned over and kissed her before she got out. It wasn't a friendly kiss. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. Everything I had been pushing down, all the little fears and suspicions, came rushing to the surface. It was real. It was all real. We didn't say much after that. There was nothing to say. We just sat in the kitchen in a heavy, shared silence, the unspoken truth, a living thing between us. That evening, I was a wreck. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. I just kept replaying Leo's words in my head. Around 7, I heard the front door open. It was Richard. He was humming, cheerful. He probably thought I was still at the office. I stayed in the kitchen, hidden from the entryway. I heard another set of footsteps, lighter, her laugh, Isabella's. My blood ran cold. I crept to the edge of the kitchen doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I saw them. They were in the hall, standing by the large mirror where we used to measure Leo's height as a boy. Richard had his hands on her waist. She was looking up at him, her face glowing with adoration. "He suspects nothing," she murmured, her voice a low purr. "He's too focused on his silly little movie." Richard chuckled. "Good. Let's keep it that way." And then he lowered his head and kissed her, deeply, possessively, in my home, the home I built, the home where I raised my son. A roar filled my ears, a white-hot rage, so pure and so absolute it almost knocked me off my feet. I was about to storm out there, to scream, to claw their eyes out. I didn't care about dignity. I didn't care about making a scene. I wanted to destroy them. But just as I took a step forward, a hand grabbed my arm, pulling me back into the shadows of the kitchen. It was Leo. He had come back. He must have seen their cars. His face was a mask of stone. He put a finger to his lips, his eyes burning with a cold, hard fire I had never seen before. He looked at me, his mother, the woman who was supposed to protect him, and whispered the words that changed everything. "Don't, Mom, not yet." He pulled me further into the kitchen, his grip like steel. "I know," he said, his voice barely audible, but laced with venom. "And it's worse than you think. I hired a detective." The detective was my cousin Clara, ex-Chicago PD, 20 years on the force, most of them in the white-collar crime division. She left the force to start her own private investigation agency. Clara was sharp, relentless, and had a built-in lie detector that never failed. She also never really liked Richard. 2 days later, the three of us met in Clara's small, cluttered office in a nondescript building on the west side. The air smelled of stale coffee and secrets. Clara didn't waste time with pleasantries. She just slid a thick, beige folder across her desk toward me. "Here you go, Eleanor," she said, her voice flat. "The last 3 months of your husband's life and your son's fiancée's." My hands were shaking as I opened it. The first thing I saw was a photograph. It was taken from a distance, but the image was perfectly clear. Richard and Isabella walking into the Peninsula Chicago Hotel, hand in hand. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. A Tuesday Richard was supposedly at an all-day conference in Schaumburg. There were more photos. Them laughing at a corner table in a dimly lit restaurant. Them kissing in his car in a parking garage. Page after page of their secret life. But the photos were just the beginning. Clara had dug into the finances, and that was where the true horror lay. She laid out a copy of the second mortgage agreement. "I had a friend in forensics look at the signature," Clara said, tapping a perfectly forged Eleanor Vance. "It's a damn good forgery, but it's not yours." Then came the bank statements. She showed me the $150,000 being deposited into a new account Richard had opened without my knowledge. And then she showed me where the money went. $80,000 had been wired to an offshore account connected to that real estate deal Isabella had pushed. "The deal never existed," Clara said bluntly. "The money went straight into a shell corporation she controls. She was playing him too. So he was stealing from me to give to her, and she was stealing from him. It was a perfect, disgusting circle of greed. But that wasn't the worst of it. Not even close." Clara slid another document across the desk. It was a series of bank transfers. $5,000. Every single month for the last 17 years. Sent to a woman I had never heard of. "Who is this?" I whispered, my mouth suddenly dry. "That," Clara said, her voice softening for the first time, "is the mother of your husband's other son." The air left my lungs. Other son. The words didn't make sense. "His name is Maya," Clara continued softly, pushing a copy of a birth certificate toward me. "He's 17 years old. Father's name is left blank, but there's no doubt. I ran a background check. The mother started blackmailing Richard shortly after the boy was born. He's been paying her to keep quiet ever since." 17 years. A secret son. A whole other life he had kept hidden. The late nights at the office, the unexplained business trips. It all crashed down on me. It wasn't just an affair. My entire marriage, my entire family was a lie. Clara let that sink in before she delivered the final blow. "And then there's Isabella," she said, her voice hard again. "She's not just a homewrecker. She's a criminal." She turned her laptop around. On the screen was a complex diagram of accounts and transactions. "She's been using inside information from her firm to make illegal trades. We're talking millions of dollars in illicit profits. She's smart, but she's gotten sloppy. I've already passed this information along to a friend at the SEC. Anonymously, of course. For now." I stared at the folder, the photos, the forged signature, the birth certificate of a son I never knew, the evidence of multi-million-dollar fraud. It was all there, a neat, organized demolition of my life. Leo put his hand on my shoulder. "What do we do, Mom?" he asked, his voice thick with rage. I looked from my son's pained face to my cousin's determined one. The woman who had cried over a pawned necklace was gone. The wife who made excuses was gone. In her place was someone cold and clear and ready for war. I closed the folder. "We don't do anything," I said, a plan beginning to form in the icy ruins of my heart. "Not yet. We have a party to plan, and it's going to be a night they will never forget." We are back at the party. The image of Richard and Isabella kissing hangs on the screen above us, stark and damning in the glittering ballroom. The silence that followed the initial gasp is heavy, suffocating. You can hear every nervous cough, every whispered, "Oh my God." Richard finally finds his voice. "This is insane," he sputters, his face a blotchy red. This is a fake, a Photoshop. "Eleanor, what are you doing? You're having a breakdown." He tries to laugh, a desperate, strangled sound that convinces no one. Isabella is on her feet, her hands trembling. "Leo, baby, you don't believe this, do you? Your mother. She's always been jealous of our connection." I look at her, a predator in a white dress, and I almost laugh. "Jealous? Oh, honey, you have no idea." "A breakdown, Richard," I say into the microphone, my voice dangerously calm. "A fake? Let's see." I press the button on the remote again. The picture changes. Now it's a split screen. On one side is a copy of the second mortgage agreement for $150,000. On the other side is a close-up of my signature from our tax returns. In the middle, huge red letters spell out, "Signature forged." The murmuring in the crowd grows louder. I can see Richard's business partners staring, their faces hardening. "You told me I forgot signing it," I say, my voice ringing through the ballroom. "You told me I was hysterical. You stole from our home, from our future, and tried to make me think I was losing my mind." Click. The next slide. Bank statements. Arrows point to cash withdrawals, to a transfer of $80,000 to an offshore account. Next to it, a receipt from a jewelry store. Breitling watch, $8,000. Click. A photo of Isabella from her Instagram, smiling at a charity gala. The same distinctive Breitling watch clearly visible on her wrist. I can see her parents in the front row. Her father, a respected federal judge, looks like he's been turned to stone. Her mother has her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "You were stealing from me to buy her gifts," I say, my voice like ice. "And she was stealing from you. That $80,000 investment, it went straight into her pocket. She played you for a fool, Richard." He's stammering now, incoherent, looking around for an escape that isn't there. Isabella is shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's not true. It's not true," she chants, a pathetic mantra of denial. But I'm not finished. I saved the best for last. "But the lies didn't start with you, Isabella," I say, my voice softening with mock pity. "Richard has been living a double life for a very, very long time." Click. The final slide appears on the screen. It's a birth certificate. The name Maya is clearly visible. Next to it is a school photo of a handsome 17-year-old boy. A boy who has Richard's eyes, my husband's secret son. "This is Maya," I announced to the silent staring room. "He is 17 years old. My husband has been paying $5,000 a month in blackmail money to keep his other family a secret for 17 years. That's when the chaos erupts. The silence is shattered by a single sharp sob from Isabella as she collapses into her chair. But no one is looking at her anymore. They are all staring at Richard. His face is no longer just pale, it's gray, the color of ash. He looks trapped, exposed, utterly destroyed. And in that moment, when his entire world is burning down around him, he does the only thing a coward can do. He runs. He turns and bolts for the exit, shoving past a waiter, sending a tray of champagne glasses crashing to the floor. But he doesn't get far. Just as he reaches the ballroom doors, they swing open. 2 men in dark suits step inside. Federal agents. They ignore Richard completely. Their eyes scan the room and land on Isabella. "Isabella Croft?" one of them says, his voice calm and authoritative. "You're under arrest for securities fraud and insider trading." As they snap the handcuffs on her wrists, she lets out a shrill, animal scream of terror. The judge, her father, slumps forward in his chair as if he's been shot. And as Richard stands frozen in the doorway, watching the ruins of his life being led away in handcuffs, a second pair of officers, Chicago PD, step up behind him. "Richard Vance," one of them says, "we have a few questions for you about a fraudulent mortgage application." It's over. Checkmate. 2 years later, the world looks different from my penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. The water is calm today, a vast expanse of blue that stretches to the horizon. It's peaceful. A word I never thought I'd associate with my life again. After that night, the scandal was explosive. It was all over the Chicago Tribune, the local news. "The anniversary ambush," one headline called it. For a few weeks, my life was a media circus. But eventually, the storm passed, as storms always do. Richard and Isabella faced their own separate reckonings. With the mountain of evidence against her, Isabella took a plea deal. She's currently serving a 5-year sentence in a federal prison for her financial crimes. Richard's downfall was just as swift. He was convicted of fraud. He lost his architectural license, his firm, his reputation. He served 18 months and is now out on parole, a ghost of the man he once was. Our divorce was quick and quiet. I got the house, the assets, everything he had tried to steal. I sold the house immediately. It was beautiful but full of ghosts. I needed a fresh start. My business, Vance Marketing, not only survived but thrived. Some clients left, uncomfortable with the scandal, but far more new ones came, drawn to the story of a woman who refused to be a victim. They saw strength, not scandal. My company is bigger now than it ever was. We just opened a second office in New York. Leo, my wonderful, brave son, channeled his pain into his art. He made a documentary. It wasn't about the scandal, not really. It was about family secrets, about the lies we tell ourselves and the people we love. It won an award at Sundance. He's in a new relationship now with a kind, gentle woman who looks at him with honest eyes. He's healing. He's happy. And then there's Maya. A few months after the party, after the dust had settled, Leo and I met him. We sat in a quiet coffee shop, 3 strangers bound together by one man's deceit. He was a good kid, scared, confused, but with a quiet strength in his eyes. Richard's eyes. It was hard at first to look at him and not see the betrayal. But he wasn't the betrayal. He was just a boy, an innocent victim in a story he never asked to be a part of. He and Leo clicked immediately. They found they had the same dry sense of humor, the same love for old movies. They started talking, then hanging out. They became brothers. And slowly, tentatively, Maya became a part of my life, too. He's not a symbol of a lie anymore. He's just Maya, a bright, funny, wonderful young man who is now a freshman at Northwestern studying journalism. He comes over for dinner every Sunday. He and Leo argue about football, and I just sit and listen. a quiet joy filling my chest. Last week, my doorbell rang. It was Richard. I hadn't seen him since his sentencing. He looked older, smaller. The arrogant charm was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow weariness. He apologized, a quiet, broken apology for the years of lies, for the pain he caused everyone. I listened, and I said the words I never thought I would. I forgive you, Richard. I wasn't forgiving the thief or the liar. I was letting go of the anger that had lived in my heart for so long. It was too heavy to carry anymore. But we can never go back, I told him. He just nodded and left. The family I thought I had was a lie. It shattered into a million pieces in that glittering ballroom. But what we built from the wreckage, me, Leo, and Maya, is smaller, quieter, and imperfect. But it's real. It's built on a painful, difficult truth. And for the first time in a very long time, I am at peace. I am free. I appreciate you staying with me through this story. If it reminded you of something in your own life, or if you just want to share how it made you feel, leave a comment. I'd love to read it. Your stories are important. And if you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe for more. Stay kind to yourself, and see you soon.